The sun burned high over the endless desert. Heat shimmered above the dunes, and the wind carried grains of sand that scratched against skin and clothes. Tomas walked beside his small cart, leading a mule that pulled his tools and supplies. He was a traveling mechanic, known from village to village for fixing broken engines, cracked water pumps, and even radios that had stopped singing. The desert was hard, but people still lived here, and they always needed someone like him. By late afternoon, he reached a small town resting at the edge of the dunes. The buildings were low and flat, made of stone and mud, shaped to resist the desert storms. A wooden tower with a signal lantern stood at the center, its paint fading under the constant sun. Children ran across the dusty streets, their laughter carrying lightly in the hot wind. Tomas wiped the sweat from his brow, glad to see life after weeks of lonely travel. Another wanderer, a guard at the gate said with a small smile. You came at the right time. Machines here are always breaking. Thomas nodded politely. Then I will earn my stay. The guard let him pass, and Tomas guided his mule toward the inn. The owner, a wide-shouldered woman named Hannah, welcomed him with water and bread. Inside, the cool air brought relief. Thomas set his pack down, happy to rest for the night. As the sun dipped below the horizon, people gathered in the square. Tomas sat with them, eating stew cooked from desert roots. Around the fire, the townsfolk told stories. One older man spoke, with a voice that carried both weight and warning. The desert is alive, he said. It listens when we forget respect. It has taken many who walked too far. A younger boy laughed. Grandfather's tales again. But the older man shook his head. You think it is just sand? No. The desert has a mouth, and when it opens, it does not give back what it takes. Some nodded, others smiled politely, but Tomas leaned back in silence. He had heard many strange beliefs during his travels. Superstition was strong where life was harsh. People needed stories to explain the dangers they could not fight. When night fell, the air grew cooler. Tomas lay on his cot in the inn, staring at the ceiling. The firelight outside faded, replaced by the quiet hum of insects and the whistle of wind against the walls. He closed his eyes, expecting a peaceful night's rest. But near midnight, the ground began to shake. At first, it was gentle, like a wagon rolling past. Then it grew stronger. The walls groaned, and cups rattled on shelves. Tomas sat up quickly. Shouts rose from outside. He grabbed his boots and rushed into the open air. The townsfolk had gathered in fear. In the distance, out in the dunes, the sand was moving. Tomas rubbed his eyes, certain it was a trick of the dark. But no, the sand truly moved like water. Dunes rippled and collapsed, waves of dust rolling higher than houses. Then came the sound, a deep, thunderous roar from beneath. The earth. It was not wind nor storm. It was something vast and alive. Suddenly, the desert opened. Before Tomas's eyes, the ground split apart. A caravan of traders, who had camped just outside town, cried out as the sand beneath them gave way. Camels, wagons, and men tumbled into the widening gap. The earth swallowed them whole. A single scream cut across the night, then vanished into silence. Tomas felt his chest tighten. He could not move, could not speak. The sand closed back over the hole as if nothing had happened. The dunes stood still again, silent under the stars. The people of the town whispered in fear. Some fell to their knees, others clutched charms and prayed. The old man from the fire pointed toward the desert with trembling hands. I told you, he cried. The desert has a mouth, and tonight it has eaten. Tomas's heart pounded. He wanted to believe it was just an earthquake, a rare and violent one, but his eyes could not forget what they had seen. The ground had not only broken, it had closed again, smooth as before. No crack remained. No trace of the caravan. The night grew heavy with silence. Not even the insects sang. The desert stretched out endlessly, dark and waiting. Back in the inn, Thomas lay awake until dawn, staring at the wall. His hands shook, though he tried to steady them. He had traveled across many lands, fixed countless machines, and heard every kind of story, but nothing had prepared him for this. When the first light of morning touched the dunes, Tomas made a decision. He would not leave this town just yet. Something was hidden beneath the sand, something far beyond old tales. He needed to know the truth, and deep within the desert, under layers of shifting sand, something stirred again, as if answering his unspoken thoughts. The morning sun rose over the dunes, turning the desert into waves of gold. The town was quiet. People spoke in hushed voices, as if afraid the desert itself was listening. The loss of the caravan weighed heavy. No one dared go near the place. Where the ground had opened during the night, Thomas sat outside the inn, sharpening a tool with slow strokes. His hands moved, but his mind was elsewhere. He could not forget the roar that had shaken the earth, or the way the sand had swallowed men, animals, and wagons whole. It was not a trick of his eyes. It was real. As he worked, an older woman approached him. She wore long, faded robes and leaned on a wooden staff. Her face was weathered by years of sun and sand, but her dark eyes shone with sharpness. "You saw it," she said simply. Tomas looked up. "Yes, I saw." The woman lowered herself onto the step beside him. "The others will hide behind prayer. They will say the desert is angry and hope it sleeps again. But I know better. I have walked these sands for 50 years. It is not anger. It is memory." Tomas frowned. "Memory?" She nodded. "Something old lies under the desert. It shifts when disturbed, and sometimes it opens. Last night it opened wider than I have ever seen." The woman introduced herself as Myra, a wanderer who had once been a guide for caravans. She had seen strange lights under the sand, patterns that appeared and vanished, and places where compasses failed to point north. She believed something vast was buried below the dunes. Tomas listened with interest. He had no patience for wild superstition, but Myra's words carried more weight than the old man's stories by the fire. She spoke not of spirits, but of structures, shapes and things built by hands. "Come," Myra said, rising slowly. "I will show you." Together, they left the town. The guards called out in warning, but Myra waved them off. Tomas followed her into the dunes, carrying a water flask and his pack of tools. The desert heat pressed down on them, and the sand shifted beneath their boots. For hours they walked until they reached a ridge overlooking a shallow valley. Myra pointed. "There." At first Thomas saw only sand. Then, as the wind brushed it aside, he noticed marks. Strange lines curved across the ground, forming wide circles burned into the surface. They were too perfect to be natural. The lines glowed faintly in the sunlight, as if some kind of metal lay beneath the sand. Tomas knelt to touch one. The metal was warm, though the wind had cooled the surface around it. He tapped it with a wrench from his pack, and it rang with a deep, hollow sound, as if the desert floor itself were a giant bell. "This is no trick of nature," Thomas said quietly. Myra gave a small smile. "Now you see. This is why the desert opens. Something far larger than us sleeps below, and sometimes it stirs." They followed the lines across the valley until they reached a crack in the ground. It was narrow, only a few feet wide, but deep. Tomas peered inside and felt a cold draft rise from it. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rust and oil. Myra steadied herself on her staff. "This gap opened years ago. I came once, but fear held me back. Last night the earth shook harder, and the crack grew wider. Now it may lead inside." Tomas felt his heart race. He had spent his life repairing machines, but nothing on Earth could explain the desert's shifting mouth. He tied a rope around a rock and lowered himself slowly into the crack. The walls were smooth, not of stone but of dark alloy. His boots scraped lightly as he descended, and soon he touched solid ground below. The space beneath was wide and hollow. When his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Thomas gasped. He stood in the tunnel stretching far into the dark, its walls made of the same strange metal. The ceiling arched high above, and faint blue lines glowed along the surface like veins of light. The air hummed with a low vibration, steady and deep, as if the place itself were alive. Mira followed him down carefully. She looked around with awe. This is no cave. This is a machine. Thomas ran his hand across the wall. It was smooth as glass, yet warm, pulsing gently under his touch. He felt a faint spark run through his fingertips, and the blue lines brightened. For a moment, Myra's eyes widened. It responds to you. The hum grew louder. Somewhere in the distance, a low groan echoed through the tunnel. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the ground shifted slightly beneath their feet. Thomas stepped back, breathing heavily. We should leave. But as they turned, the tunnel lit up in a wave of blue light stretching deeper into the darkness. The glow revealed massive gears and pillars along the walls, machinery the size of houses, all silent but waiting. The groan returned, longer this time, as if the desert itself had taken a deep breath. Myra's voice trembled with both fear and wonder. The desert does not only have a mouth, it has a heart. Thomas stared into the endless tunnel. He no longer doubted. Her words, something ancient and powerful, lay hidden below, and it had just awakened to his touch. The tunnel stretched far into the distance, glowing faintly with blue lines that ran like veins along the walls. Thomas and Mira stood still for a long moment, listening to the low hum that seemed to rise from the floor itself. The air smelled sharp, not of dust or stone, but of iron and something electric. This is no ruin, Thomas said, his voice low. It is still alive. Myra gripped her staff tightly. Then we walk carefully. The desert does not want to sleep. Again, they moved forward, their footsteps echoing against the smooth floor. The tunnel was wide enough for a wagon to pass through, and high enough that shadows stretched into the dark above. Along the walls, huge gears stood locked in place, their teeth sharp and silent, waiting for a hand to set them in motion again. Pipes ran overhead, like the veins of some buried giant. Thomas touched the wall again. The blue lines brightened under. His fingers and the hum rose, vibrating through his chest. Mira stepped back in alarm. It knows you, she whispered. Thomas shook his head. It cannot know me. I am no one. But perhaps it recognizes something human. As they continued deeper, the tunnel widened into a chamber. It was vast, stretching. Beyond the light of their lantern, pillars of alloy rose to the ceiling, and platforms hung suspended by thick cables. At the center, a console stood, a raised stone-like structure. Though its surface glowed faintly with symbols Thomas could not read, he stepped closer, drawn to it. The symbols shifted when his hand hovered above them, rearranging into patterns. That almost made sense. His heart pounded. He lowered his palm, and the surface lit up beneath his touch. A rush of sound filled the chamber. Not a voice, but a chorus of tones, layered and deep, rising into a rhythm-like speech. The walls pulsed with light. Mira covered her ears, but Thomas forced himself to listen. Slowly, the tone shaped into words he could understand. Human presence. Detected. Lineage confirmed. Thomas staggered back, his breath caught in his throat. Confirmed? What does that mean? The console answered with another tone, and the walls around them shifted. Large sections of the chamber slid open, revealing massive machines. They looked like towers of steel, covered in dust from centuries of slumber. Yet as the blue lines ran across them, they began to move. Plates unfolded, gears rotated, and a low rumble shook the ground. Myra's eyes widened in fear. "You have woken it." One of the machines turned slowly. It was shaped like a giant figure, not alive but built from armor and light. Its head turned toward Tomas. Beams of blue scanned across him, pausing at his chest, then his face. He felt the air buzz against his skin as though he were being measured. "Designation incomplete," the voice said. Awaiting command, Tomas could barely speak. "I have no command. I do not even understand what you are." The machine froze. The chamber went silent, except for the deep hum. Mira stepped forward carefully. "These are guardians. They were left behind long ago. You touched their heart, and now they think you are their master." Tomas shook his head. "That cannot be true. I am just a mechanic." But the console glowed brighter and showed visions projected into the air above it. Tomas saw men and women dressed in strange armor, leading these machines across vast deserts. He saw ships rising into the skies, carrying people away while the machines remained behind. Then the vision ended with the words, "Humanity has returned." Tomas stared at the fading light. His mouth was dry. The machines believed he was part of whatever humanity had been here before. Somehow, they recognized him as one of their own. The ground trembled again, stronger this time. Dust fell from the ceiling. The machines stirred restlessly, their gears grinding. Outside, faint echoes of shifting sand could be heard, as though the desert itself was responding to their awakening. Mira clutched her staff. "If the rest of the desert wakes, the town will not survive. We must decide now. Do we leave, or do we try to understand?" Tomas looked at his hands. All his life, he had fixed small things, broken pumps, cracked radios, weak engines. But now he had touched something far greater, something that seemed to expect him to guide it. He felt a strange weight in his chest, half fear, half duty. "Understand," he said at last. "If we leave, it will not go back to sleep. Someone must know what lies beneath these sands." Mira nodded slowly, though her eyes carried worry. Together, they turned back to the console. The machines loomed. Above them, silent but waiting. The desert had opened its mouth, and Tomas realized it was not done speaking. The machines stood silent, their tall frames glowing faintly in the chamber. They were not fully alive, yet not dead either, as if waiting for a signal. Tomas stepped back from the console, his heart racing. The vision he had seen still burned. In his mind, humans leading these machines long ago, ships leaving the world, and the final message: humanity has returned. Myra walked slowly around one of the giant machines. Her staff tapped lightly on the metal floor. "These are not just guardians," she said. "They are parts of something larger. Look at how they are connected to the walls. They are not only soldiers, they are pieces of the desert itself." Tomas studied the walls. Cables and pipes ran from the machines into the alloy, disappearing into the ground. The low hum grew stronger, steady and powerful, like a heartbeat. He pressed his hand to the wall, and once again the blue lines brightened. Under his touch, the voice returned, echoing from every direction. "System status: dormant. Awakening sequence incomplete. Awaiting directive." The words filled Tomas with unease. He wanted to say nothing, but his silence itself seemed dangerous. He turned to Myra. "If this place is waking, can it be stopped?" Myra shook her head slowly. "Not by us. It was built to wait. Built to rise again when it sensed humans. You touched its heart. Now it will not close its eyes easily." The ground trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere deep in the tunnel behind them, a grinding roar echoed, like stone tearing apart. Tomas and Mira rushed toward the opening of the chamber, And when they looked out, they saw the desert itself shaking. The dunes shifted, rising and collapsing as if waves moved beneath them. Entire ridges of sand rolled away, exposing dark alloy beneath. Towers of metal began to push up through the surface, glinting under the sun. The desert that had once seemed endless and still now looked alive, as though the very land was breathing back. In the town, people screamed as the earth shook. Houses cracked, walls tumbled, and frightened animals bolted in every direction. Hannah, the innkeeper, grabbed children and pulled them to safety, shouting prayers as the ground rumbled. All eyes turned toward the horizon where the dunes rose, like waves, breaking apart to reveal massive shapes of buried machines. Tomas and Mira stood at the tunnel mouth, watching in awe and fear. "The mouth is not the only part," Myra whispered. "The whole desert is its body." The console inside the chamber flared with light, sending beams racing along the walls. Tomas turned back toward it. He could not escape the feeling that it was calling him. His legs moved before his mind could argue. Mira followed close, unwilling to let him go alone. When Tomas reached the console, new symbols had appeared, brighter and clearer than before. He did not recognize the language. Yet somehow his eyes began to understand. The words rearranged themselves until he could read them. Command transfer ready. Choose awaken or silence. Thomas froze. His breath caught in his throat. This machine, this desert, was asking him to decide. Myra read the words as well, though. Slower. Her hand trembled on her staff. "It offers you control. But to awaken, Tomas, would mean power beyond anything we know. And to silence may mean to bury what it is forever." The ground shook again. Outside, a dune collapsed, sending a storm of sand across the horizon. The people in the town were already suffering. If the awakening continued, the whole settlement could be destroyed. Yet Tomas knew if he silenced it now, he might be destroying knowledge of humanity's past, something that might never return again. His hands hovered over the glowing surface. "Why me?" he whispered. The console answered, its voice steady. "Lineage confirmed. Human presence acceptable. You carry the key of recognition." Thomas clenched his jaw. He did not understand what lineage it spoke of. He was no leader, no warrior, just a mechanic who fixed broken pumps and tools. Yet here he was, being asked to choose for something greater than himself. Myra stepped closer. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were firm. "Do not let pride guide you. Do not think of yourself as chosen. Think of what must be done now. The people above need safety. If the desert rises fully, they will all be buried." Thomas lowered his head. His hands shook as he pressed them against the console. "Silence," he said. The console flared, and the voice responded. "Command received. Attempting shutdown." The machines groaned. The blue lines dimmed. For a moment, it seemed as if the desert would settle again. But then, a deep roar rose from below. The console flashed red, and new words appeared. "Shutdown incomplete. Core awakening cannot be stopped." Myra gasped. "It is too late." Tomas stepped back, his heart hammering. Outside, the dunes erupted as giant metallic spires rose higher into the sky. The desert's mouth had not only opened, it was fully waking. The desert roared as if a storm was trapped beneath the sand. Spires of metal rose from the dunes, throwing off cascades of grit and stone. Towers, once hidden for centuries, stretched toward the sky, their smooth alloy surfaces glowing with blue lines that pulsed like veins. From the town, the people watched in terror. They clung to broken walls and sheltered children under cloth awnings. The dunes they had known all their lives were gone, replaced by strange shapes that looked neither natural nor human. Hannah shouted to the crowd, "Stay together. Do not run." Into the desert, but her own voice shook with fear. None of them had ever seen anything like this. Deep below, Tomas and Mira held their ground near the console. The machines in the chamber stirred, their joints creaking as gears turned for the first time in ages. One stepped forward, its heavy feet striking the metal floor with a weight that made the ground tremble. The voice from the console spoke again. Guardians activated. Survey initiated. The machines turned their glowing eyes on Tomas. One raised an arm, projecting a beam of blue light across his body. Tomas froze as the light scanned his face, his chest, and even his hands. It felt warm, almost alive, like fingers of air brushing against his skin. Designation incomplete, the machine said. Searching for command authority. Mira pulled him back, but the beam followed. It has chosen you, she whispered. I do not want to be chosen, Tomas muttered. Yet inside, he knew there was no escape. Since his first touch on the console, the desert had recognized him. Suddenly, the chamber shook again. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a new passage. From it, smaller constructs emerged, machines shaped like animals, crawling on many legs of steel. Their bodies glowed faintly, and their eyes flashed with scanning lights. They moved with a strange grace, like hunters testing the air. The console's voice continued. Survey expanding. Local population identified. Evaluation required. Tomas's stomach turned. It was not just looking at him, it was looking at the people in the town above. We cannot let them reach the town, Myra said firmly. The people will not survive their judgment. Tomas clenched his fists. He felt helpless, but the machines still focused on him. The console lit up once more, asking, Confirm authority? Are you human command? His mouth went dry. He did not understand what kind of command it wanted. He was not a leader, not a soldier, only a man who fixed broken things. But if he stayed silent, the machines might decide on their own. He thought of Hannah, the children, and all the people who trusted the desert to keep them safe. Tomas stepped forward, forcing his voice steady. Yes, I am human. The machines froze. The lights flickered, then steadied. The console responded. Authority confirmed. Awaiting directive. Mira stared at him in shock. You spoke for all of us. I had to, Thomas whispered. If I didn't, the machines would have decided without us. The larger guardian lowered itself onto one knee, its head bowing slightly. The smaller constructs retreated, their glowing eyes dimming as if waiting for orders. For a moment, silence filled the chamber, but outside, the awakening continued. The dune shook, more towers rose, and the desert seemed endless in its stirring. From the tops of the towers, beams of light shot into the sky, piercing the clouds. The air itself hummed, and the wind carried a strange metallic taste. Back in the town, the people fell to their knees, thinking the sky itself was breaking open. Hannah gritted her teeth and shouted, Do not give up. Whatever this is, we will face it together. Below, Tomas turned back to the console. New words formed across its surface. Directive options. Protect. Harvest. Prepare. Launch. The choices made his chest tighten. He could not fully understand what each meant, but the meanings were clear enough to fear. Protect sounded safe, but harvest could only mean danger to the people. Prepare and launch hinted at something larger, something far beyond the desert. Mira read the words slowly. Her brow furrowed. This is not only a machine. It is part of a ship buried beneath the desert. Tomas stared at her. A ship? So the desert itself could rise? She nodded. The mouth was only the beginning. It is waking for flight. The console repeated the words again. Protect. Harvest. Prepare. Launch. Tomas's hands hovered over the glowing surface. His heart pounded. If he chose wrong, the people above would suffer. If he chose nothing, the desert might decide for him. Myra's voice was calm but urgent. Tomas, whatever you do, remember the town. Remember the lives above us. Tomas swallowed hard. He raised his hand and touched the glowing word protect. The machines in the chamber shifted. Their eyes glowed brighter, and the voice declared, directive received. Protection mode activated. Above, the spires slowed their rise. The dunes stopped shaking. A dome of faint blue light spread across the horizon, covering the town like a shield. The people gasped as the strange glow surrounded them, forming a barrier against the raging sands. Tomas fell to his knees, exhausted, his hands still pressed to the console. Mira knelt beside him, her eyes wide with both fear and wonder. You have become its voice, she said softly. But Tomas knew the truth. He had only delayed what was coming. The desert was awake now, and it would not return to sleep. The dome of blue light shimmered over the town, calm and steady, protecting the people from the shifting sands outside. For the first time since the desert had awakened, silence returned. The towers stood like frozen giants, humming faintly. But the shaking stopped. In the chamber below, Tomas sat with his hands still pressed to the console. Sweat dripped from his brow, and his arms trembled with strain. The moment he lifted his hand, the console dimmed but did not go dark. The words remained glowing faintly, waiting for him to act again. Myra stood beside him, her face pale in the blue glow. You stopped the destruction. The town is safe for now. Tomas lowered his head. Safe for now. But the desert is not finished. It is awake, and it will keep asking for more. The console pulsed with light. New words appeared, shifting. Across the surface, directive complete. Await next command. Options. Harvest. Prepare. Launch. The word protect faded, as if it could not be chosen again. Tomas's heart sank. The machine had obeyed him, but only partly. It wanted more. It was waiting for him to choose its next path. Myra read the glowing words and shook her head. Harvest means it will take from us. Prepare or launch could mean something worse. You cannot trust its choices. Tomas stared at the options. He thought of the visions he had seen earlier, humans leading these machines, ships rising into the sky. If this desert was part of ship, then prepare might mean waking the rest of it. Launch might mean tearing it free from the earth. I cannot choose, he said quietly. But the console responded in its calm, steady voice. Human presence required. Directive must be confirmed. The chamber trembled. The machine stirred again, restless in the silence. Outside, the spires groaned, as though preparing to rise further. The town above began to feel the vibrations once more. Myra placed a hand on Tomas's shoulder. If you do nothing, it will choose for you. That may be worse. Tomas closed his eyes. He was only a mechanic. His whole life he had fixed broken pumps and patched weak engines. He had never commanded anything greater than a cart and a mule. Now the desert, an ancient machine, wanted him to decide the fate of everyone. He looked at Mira. Why me? Why not you or anyone else? Myra's gaze was steady. Because you touched it first. It recognized you. Sometimes fate does not choose the strongest or the wisest. It simply chooses the one who is there. Her words did not ease his fear, but they gave him resolve. He stepped forward, placing his hands on the console again. The voice returned, directive required. Tomas spoke slowly, his voice trembling. I will not let you harm the people above. Do you understand? The console glowed brighter. Acknowledged. Protection priority confirmed. Awaiting secondary directive. The words on the surface shifted again, but this time they carried more detail. Harvest resources to maintain protection. Prepare systems for expansion. Launch vessel to rejoin. Human fleet Thomas felt his chest tighten. The desert wanted resources. To protect the town, it would need to take from somewhere else, perhaps water, land, or even lives. Myra leaned closer, reading the words carefully. If it harvests, it may strip the land bare. If it prepares, more of the desert will rise. If it launches, the earth itself may break apart. None of these are safe. Tomas pressed his hands harder on the console. There must be another way. But the console gave no answer. The glowing words pulsed, insistent, waiting. Above, in the town, people gathered under this shimmering dome of light. Hannah stood at the front, staring toward the dunes. She could see towers rising farther away, shapes moving beneath the sand, as if more of the desert's hidden body was stirring. She did not know what Tomas was doing below, but she prayed he would keep them safe. Back in the chamber, Tomas's mind raced. He thought of his life, of every broken tool he had fixed. He had always believed that no machine was beyond repair, that every problem had a solution if you looked hard enough. Now he faced a machine greater than all others, and he refused to believe its choices were limited to destruction. He leaned close to the console. "Show me another option." The blue light flickered. For a moment, the words did not change. Then, slowly, a new phrase appeared beneath the others. "Rewrite directive. Custom input allowed." Mara gasped. "It listens to you." Tomas's pulse quickened. For the first time, he felt not fear, but hope. The machine would not force him to choose between its three paths. He could write his own, but hope carried danger too. If he gave the wrong command, he might destroy everything. His hands shook as he thought of the town, the people, and the shield that now protected them. He had one chance to make a choice that would shape not only the desert, but the future. He whispered to Myra, "This is more than fixing a machine. This is rewriting it." She nodded. "Then write carefully, Tomas. The desert is listening." The chamber was silent, except for the faint hum of the console. Tomas stood before it, his hands trembling but steady enough to hold their place. The glowing words had given him a chance. Rewrite directive. Custom input allowed. Mira stood at his side, her breath quick and sharp. The dome above the town flickered faintly, holding strong for now, but every heartbeat carried the risk of collapse if Tomas delayed too long. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "This desert is not only a weapon, it is also a vessel." It was. Built to listen. If it listens, then it can be guided. Myra nodded, then guided. "Do not let its strength turn against us." Tomas leaned close, his voice clear and firm. New directive. Protect the people. Do not harm the land. Restore what was broken. The console pulsed brighter, as if weighing his words. Then, slowly, the chamber filled with a deep sound, like the desert itself was breathing. Directive recorded. Processing. The walls shook. The towers outside glowed brighter. The shifting sand stilled. For the first time since the desert had awakened, peace seemed possible. But then the console spoke again. Resources required to maintain directive. Specify source. Tomas's chest tightened. The machine was powerful, but even protection demanded fuel. He could not allow it to harvest the earth or harm his people. His mind raced. "Take from yourself," he whispered. The console paused. "Clarify input. Use your own systems. Recycle what you have. No harm to life, no harm to land. Only restoration." The blue light shivered as if resisting. Myra placed her hand on Tomas's arm. "Will it obey?" The console gave a long hum. Then, to their relief, it answered. Directive confirmed. Systems adapting. Above them, the dome steadied, no longer flickering. The towers stopped groaning. Instead of pushing upward, they sank slightly back into the sand, folding into quiet forms. The desert's breath softened, as though it had found rest. Tomas sagged. With relief, but the console's glow brightened again. Human presence detected. Bond established. Would you remain as guide? Tomas froze. He understood what it meant. The desert was not finished. It wanted him to stay as its link, its voice, its anchor to humanity. Without him, the directives might fade, and the machine might awaken again with old commands. Myra looked at him, her face stricken. If you stay, you may never leave this chamber. If you go, it may fall back into chaos. Tomas's heart was heavy. He thought of Hannah, of the townspeople, who had always counted on him to fix broken pumps and patch failing walls. Now he faced a choice far greater than all the others. He whispered, "A mechanic's job is never to abandon what he fixes. If I walk away now, the desert may lose its path." Myra's eyes glistened. "You would give your life to a machine?" Tomas shook his head. "Not to a machine, to the people. If this desert can be made to protect them, then I must stay and guide it. That is the price." Silence filled the chamber. Then Mira stepped closer. "If you must stay, then you will not stay alone. I will remain with you. Two voices are stronger than one." He turned toward her, startled. "Myra, you do not have to." But her gaze was steady. "I choose to." Before he could argue, the console pulsed, recording both presences. Bond confirmed. Two human guides established. Directive stability increased. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the chamber walls shifted, not with threat but with change. A staircase unfolded from the stone, leading upward. The console spoke again, softer now, almost gentle. "Guides may remain within or move between. Bond will endure. You are not prisoners. You are partners." Tomas blinked, hardly believing. He would not be trapped here forever. He could return to the town, yet still guide the desert when needed. He looked at Mira and let out a long breath of relief. Then we have not lost ourselves after all. When they climbed the staircase, the desert opened above them. The dome of blue light still shimmered over the town, but it was steady now, calm like a sky without storm. The townspeople had gathered, their eyes wide with fear and wonder. Hannah pushed through the crowd when she saw Tomas and Mira. "You are alive," she cried, her voice breaking with joy. Tomas smiled weakly. "Alive, and so is the town. The desert will not harm us now." The people stared in disbelief as the towers around them slowly folded back into the earth. The land smoothed, the sand settled, and the strange humming softened into silence. One by one, the townsfolk began to cheer. They did not know what Tomas had done, but they felt its gift. Safety. Myra stood close to him and whispered, "The desert has a mouth, Tomas, but now it also has ears. And it listens to you." He gazed out at the dunes, glowing faintly under the fading sun. For the first time, he did not fear what lay beneath. The desert had once been a threat, but now it was a guardian. And as long as it listened, humanity would not be swallowed by its hunger. Instead, they would walk its sands with hope. The desert had opened its mouth, but in the end, it had spoken peace.